Hello, everyone. Thank you to join. So I know we are probably keep waiting for people to join the meeting. We had a lot of people that has indicate that they will join. So maybe I will start by giving you some recalls regarding the way the etiquette for the video call. So hopefully you all had a chance to keep the rules. So first, let me present myself. I'm Lucie Marcotte. I'm the Quebec director, and as well, I'm the 2022-2023 president of the CRBOH. So hopefully you all had a chance to read the rules of conduct for this meeting today. As a reminder, we request that unless you've been asked to speak or are a presenter today, that you remain muted and use our chat function to ask questions at the appropriate time or voice opposition to a motion. Please also keep your camera off in order to achieve the best experience for all. There is no requirement to vote in favor. We are using a consensus meeting style, and you therefore only need to use your chat if you are opposed to a motion. Question and comment with regards to this meeting may also be emailed to our secretariat, and she will respond in the coming days. Thank you to Sarah McCurdy, who is our moderator today and will be monitoring the chat as we go along. If we don't get to all your questions, please know we are committed to respond to all of them in time. So please, next slide. So that was the rules of conduct. Sorry, we are running away. So, okay, so now here's so take time to review the agenda. So we did start on time and we have a charged agenda. So this is why we did start at really on time. So if the agenda is okay to all, I will need somebody to put a motion to approve the agenda. So to do so, you can do through the chat by writing your first and last name. It's really important. Or to one of my colleague from the board, the motion can be put by them too. So next slide, please. So do we have somebody to so Stéphane Archambault, I understand that you put a motion. Can Lydia Renton be the seconder, please? Yes, good. Agenda approved. Good. So is somebody opposed to the agenda? So I will let a few minutes to you all through the chat again. I remind that to, so if nobody opposed, the motion is carried out. Thank you very much. So the other motion we need is to approve the minutes of 2022 AGM. So we need, of course, somebody to, so the minutes were sent and available through our website, and I think it was sent also with the invitation. So we need somebody to put a motion to approve the minutes, but somebody that was present last year. So do I have somebody to put the motion on? So somebody said no sounds. So Kathy, check your setting. So we have a hand rise. Kathy call, is that to approve the, to put the motion on? Where you present, please answer through the chat.
Yes, that was that.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Stéphane Archambault again. 2 seconds. Good, thank you. So is there anybody that is against the motion or opposed, sorry, opposed to the approval of the 2022 minutes? So I think there's no opposition. So the motion is carried. Is carried. Thank you, everybody. So let's start with the president report. So we had a really interesting.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that was the big issue, right? So,
oh, I
oh,
don't
I
know
didn't hear
who.
that.
Mr. Lepron, can you mute yourself? Thank you. So the president report first. I want to really thank all our 2022 and 2023 board members. Uh, it was a real pleasure to work with you all this year and through all our different board projects. I had the chance that all of you were really, really good expert in the field of occupational hygiene. So we had a really good year, productive year, I think so. So if we can go through the highlights in the next slide, please. So one of our first highlights was that we finally recover with our face-to-face meeting in November 2022. At that time, we had the pleasure to exchange with our members from Toronto area during our meet and greet, and also we had the chance to meet strategic partner like the Iowa NOR Committee Chair Kelly Fernandez, as well as the BCRSP President Robin Angel, that both were joined us to the meet and greet. Um, Also, we want to announce that our next face-to-face meeting is planned to be held in Calgary in fall 2023. So our member from this area, we expect to see you all at that moment. So from in the other highlights or key accomplishment we had, we did modernize the exam process. It was a tremendous work, and we did offer the multiple choice component for the ROH and ROHT exam online. So that we will heard about that a little in more details in later in this AGM. We did also update the ROHT handbook to align it a little bit more as the one for the ROH. We also continue to upgrade the online submission process for the registration maintenance worksheet. And for to be in accordance with that, we did update also the ROH and ROHT registration maintenance guides that you can find in their new version on our website as well. We did complete also, that was a very big work. The end of a project that was initiated 2 years ago. So to define the CRBOH position regarding the scope of the profession. So the paper named The Case of Occupational Hygiene, Professional Practice and Scope Protection will be deposited really soonly on our website. So our next upcoming project will be to publish the paper and promote it. Also, we will continue and hopefully accelerate the MOU approach with key partners like university, provincial association as well. We, we will continue to improve and modernize the CRBOH examination process, the updates and or develop writing procedures for all roles within the organization. The aim is to align our procedure with the ISO 17024, which is a wish or something that we expect to be claimed or requested by the NOR Iowa program lately, not lately, but in the future. We did some work. We will maintain also work with our partners in making a Canadian breed 3D program which is an adaptation from the program of the BOHS. So I will stop here because there's more to say about all this by my other colleagues, and I will leave the microphone to Matthew Brewer, the Vice President report.
Thank you, Lucy. Welcome everyone again. My name is Matthew Brewer, Vice President for 2022-2023. So it's been a busy year, as Lucy said here. One of the projects we've been working on, we've been updating a lot of the different programs, policies, and procedures. One of the main ones we've been looking at is we made an amendment to the bylaw, the section that is highlighted here. It's about the vacancy in directorship. So, in part, it says the office of the director shall be automatically vacated. And the addition is if a director is absent without sending regrets with reasonable cause from 3 consecutive board of directors meetings. So this is a new addition so that it holds us more accountable to you, the members. So what we need to do is before we can ratify this, we need to put this to the membership as it is a bylaw change. So if you could just give that a look over for a moment, and then we're going to actually do we can go to the next one here. Thank you. So I need to put forward a motion for the bylaw amendment. Do we have a motion to approve this amendment? And again, you can just put it into the chat. And I see 2 here. I see motion to approve is from Jennifer Stanley. And I also see a second from, we have several seconds. We have Kathy Roll. We can use that one. I see also a third on there. We only need 2. So what we'll do, actually, can we go, we did have one request to see it again. If we could just go back for a moment. Thank you. So here is the bylaw, the amendment that we are requesting. So with this, we have had a motion to approve and we have had a second. Now, having it on the screen, are there any opposed? And I see a question, can I just ask why this addition? We realized that there was a gap in the process here, basically, is the rationale. That should there be a potential that a director just not be available and hasn't notified, or that hasn't happened, we're just saying that we want to make sure that we cover this. We have had, as Sarah has mentioned in the chat, we have had attendance issues in the past. So again, we want to make sure that we're accountable to you, the membership. So that is the reason for this. So again, we have had a motion to approve and we've had a second. So have we any objections? Hearing no objections, I am going to say that it has been approved. Thank you very much, everyone. So we can go to the next slide or 2. And we did this, and now it's over. That is basically it for the Vice President's report. I am going to hand it over to Alex. Alex, it's all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Alex Mercer. I'm going to give you guys the treasurer reports. So we streamlined it this year in response to some feedback we received after the last AGM that it was a little too hairy. So it should be much more clear this year. We're going to focus on 4 things. So we'll review our financial outlook by looking at the last 3 years. We'll talk about travel. As was mentioned, we had our first face-to-face since before the pandemic. So obviously that was reflected in our expenditure this year. The online exam, As again was already mentioned, we're transitioning to an online platform. And of course, this is associated with some additional costs. So we're going to be also looking at the next 5 years and what our plan is for the 2023 to 2027 range. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking here, the last 3 years, so 2020 to 2022, you can see we're in a good place. Overall, our financial outlook is improving year to year, and we're seeing that trend. We saw that last year when we had the same conversation, and again, the most recent year, 2022, we're continuing on with that trend. Our assets are increasing. Our liabilities are decreasing, albeit a minor decrease from last year, but minor is better than an increase. So overall, we're in a positive position, and the trend is moving towards more assets and fewer liabilities. Next slide. Again, we're looking at here the total revenue, and then at the very bottom line that's in orange is the difference between our revenues and expenses, which is the important line. You can see that there is a lower difference in this past year, and that is of course due to our face-to-face travel expenses. So we had about $10,000 more travel expenses, or more total expenses, sorry, in this past year related to travel. So we've decided moving into the next year, when we did that budget, that we would stick with one face-to-face. Obviously, they're associated with a significant cost, and we believe that that is enough to keep us on track while keeping our budget under control. So again, overall, positive outlook.
Alex, can you just talk about the deferred revenue for a second?
Sorry?
The deferred revenue,
sorry,
I believe it was on the
Yeah,
previous
sorry, I
slide.
just saw that on the chat there. Can we go back to the slide where that is on? I'm going to have to go back to our spreadsheet and familiarize myself with what the line item breaking, like what to break that down, what exactly that is. So my short answer is I'm going to get back to you, Lydia. We have a much more detailed spreadsheet with the breakdown. Of course, in an effort to simplify, we've maybe oversimplified this year. To do with prepaid dues. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Leah. So it's prepaid dues is what our lovely secretary is telling us, which again, that comes from our more detailed breakdown on what exactly encompasses each one of these line items. Yeah, dues collected in 2021 for the 2022 dues. So people who are on the ball and paying their membership dues early. Thanks, Leah. Okay, can we skip next and then next again? Great, thank you. So these numbers come from our auditor. We went through, as we always do, a third-party audit of our financial position. And the board has reviewed and approved the audit. It's not made available to the membership at large unless it's requested. So if you are curious and would like to see the full document, by all means, please reach out. We would be happy to share it with you. Again, it has been reviewed by the board, but I will put forth a motion to approve the 2022 auditor's report. If I could get an approval there and a seconder. Okay, great, thank you. I got Lucy and Richard both on the chat. So with that, does anyone have any qualms, concerns? Okay, I'm seeing Ted, Auditor Sports Supervisor. So Ted, that's a good question. We did show that last year. And one of the major feedbacks we got from the financial report was it was just we were drinking from a fire hose. There was just too much information. And like Sarah put in the chat too, it's absolutely available upon request. It's open information. If any of our members request to see that, we'd be happy to share it. Any comments, concerns? If not, it looks like our motion is approved. Not seeing anything else, so motion to approve the 2022 auditor's report is passed. Same thread, we would put forth a motion to appoint the same company, Scarrow and Donald. We've been working with them for quite some years, and we'd like to now appoint them for our 2023 financial audit. So if I could get a motion and a seconder in the chat, that would be great. Great, I got Lucy. Oh, it's all coming now at once. Okay, there's a bunch of names there. We can do Karen Morin and Bob Jowett, first two. Thank you. And next slide. Great, so thank you guys. Again, if anyone is curious as to the contents of the financial audit report, including that summary, as Ted mentioned, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to share. But without further ado, I will pass it on to our registrar, Helen.
Hello, my camera doesn't work, so I'm not sure what you're looking at. Presumably it's a blank screen, or just look at the slides. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from the East Coast, so it's almost supper time here. This is the registrar's report for the year. So most of you are probably aware we have basically 5 examination types. The ROHT, as you've heard already, we did the multiple choice online for both the ROHT and the ROH this year. And then we have the NAR oral, which is the international application. The majority of those applicants are coming from a CIH background, either from America or other countries, and then challenging the oral. And then we have the ROH fast track, which is an immediate multiple choice exam from new graduates, and then the ROH essay portion, which is fast track 2, which is only the essay after 3 years of practice. And then, of course, there's the ROH when you just apply for both after several years of practice. So those are the 5 exam types. And we are working on doing an exam in the fall in essay and multiple choice as well, but we're not there yet. Next, please. So membership, the next one. This is our ROHT membership across the country. The majority, of course, in Alberta, with the next most in Ontario, and just smatterings in other places. Next one, please. This year we had a lot of retirements, so you can see that in the retired, but a new category we offered was partial retirement, so you can see there's 14 there. We have international 16 and a total of 249 in the country, with Ontario as a big group, as well as Alberta, followed by British Columbia, and then the other provinces a bit less. That the numbers remaining quite steady, a little bit lower than it was perhaps 5 years ago, but it has been steady for about the last 4. Next, please. And as you can see, that's basically what I said. Between 2019 and 2022, it's quite similar, although you can see back in the peak of about 2017, 2018, we had a few more members. So there is that retirement activity going on. So hopefully we're going to get some new graduates becoming members as well. Next, please. This was the applicants for exams, and you can see it varies quite a bit between years. It really seemed to depend on the COVID year, had quite a few withdrawals. You can see there in 2020, and that number has gone down. But you can see our total has gone up since 2020, so that's good, but it still hasn't reached our pre-COVID amount of 2019. And the exam pass rates, again, these vary quite a bit, but you can see the ROHT is the blue bar and it's had a low in 2020, but has recovered somewhat. And the rate for the ROHT in this last period was 67%. The ROH Fast Track 1 was 43%. The Fast Track 2 was 100%, and the ROH, which is both exams at the same time, followed by the oral, is about 37%. So we had some new ROHT members, and these were the ones who were successful in 2022. We've had a few more successful in 2023 in the March exam, but we don't talk about that till next year. Next, please. New ROH members, you can see the 2022, it's quite a good list, but you can also see the matching number of retirees. Those are full retirees. We didn't list there the partial retirees because they're still doing work within the field and they still have their designation. Next, please. And that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, the pass rates for the NAR. I did not calculate that, but I will add that for next year. It is virtually 100%, but that's I haven't actually done that. And congratulations to all of them. Thanks very much, Brent. And the exam was a big effort. We did learn a few things in March, which we will correct for the fall writing. Apparently, it was quite stressful for the people. So the fact that a lot of them passed, I was quite happy about. But hopefully things will improve for the October writing. Any further questions? If not, I'll pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Spencer.
Hello, everyone. I'm having bandwidth issues over here, so I'm going to leave my camera off just so my sound doesn't cut out. But yes, thank you all for joining us. I'm here to update on the future of the profession and what the community has been working on. So our mission statement and our mandate have not changed from previous years. We continue to try and stay abreast of all the initiatives going on in the country, which I'll get into a little further in depth here. Ways for us to maintain our recognition in the field and with other stakeholders outside of it as well, but also to explore some new opportunities. Many will have heard of some of the title protection initiatives going on, so I'll speak further on that. But also the overarching goal, though, of this is to better serve and maintain a level of service for our external stakeholders, the employees and the personnel that we serve as occupational health professionals. Okay, next slide, please. So our problems have stayed the same. I didn't want to change this slide because we're trying to focus on the stuff we already identified previously, but as Helen had pointed out, if everyone caught that, especially on the ROH page there, we do have an attrition issue. We are seeing a lot more retirements than recruitments in the field of OH, especially for ROHs. So that's something we need to combat and something that we need to bring to the forefront. Additionally, a lot of people on this call will probably have a dual certification with another body. Most notably, it's the CIH, but we also need to maintain our Canadian designation and our stuff on the forefront. But another thing that's been ongoing is just the general recognition and the identification of what we do as occupational hygiene technicians, technologists, hygienists themselves, whatever our title might be. Hey, how many people have introduced themselves at a party when they're asked what they do for work? And the second you say you're an occupational hygienist and someone asks you whether you prefer Procter & Gamble products or Johnson & Johnson, because everyone thinks we clean stuff. We don't. So this is something that we also need to bring up to the forefront. If people don't know what we do, how can we explain our value and how we can best serve the communities that we do? So these are some of the things that have been discussed and incorporated into this committee. So I'm now going to move to the next slide. And one of the key things of this is because we bring a specific set of competencies to it. I'm reusing the slide from last year as well, just because it summarizes everything so well. Us as technologists and as hygienists, we have a specific skill set that is highly specialized, through our training, our education, and our scopes of experience. We have many people on this call who have served in government, industry, both private, public, everything. So we can bring a lot to the table. Ultimately, though, what we do is we're probably the best for occupational health, risk assessment, risk management, communication to our stakeholders. Just from that foundation that we have that is so solid. And that's something that we definitely need to get out to people so that they can understand what we do and our worth that we bring to all of this. Next slide, please. So the core focuses have been dealing with some of these initiatives that I had mentioned previously. We continue to work. I'm here in Alberta, so I'm going to say here in Alberta, but also on a national framework that's being pushed by the BCRSP. So it's been challenging, I will admit. We're dealing with two large organizations with competing, I guess, competing interests, we'll say. We're dealing with the safety side plus us trying to protect our health side of it, because ultimately what we do is we want to own that health aspect of OH&S. That really should be our domain, and the safety side can stay over there. Some of us might, in the end, practice both, which is absolutely great, but ROHTs, ROHs, we should have that H. That's ours. So we continue to work on this framework. The ASHSP is actively engaged with the BCRSP as well. They have another working group that I've been a part of as well. So I've been constantly pushing forward our mandate and what we need to achieve out of that too. So it's definitely been well heard. But what we also did too, and this is something that Lucy had said at the beginning, we had drafted this position paper on behalf of the board. So this was written with current and past board members. And basically we just want to say, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is why we matter, and this is why you need us involved and why we are such a big part of this. If these initiatives for scope and title protection are going forward in OH&S, like I said, we have to have that H, it's ours, and we need to show them why it's ours and why we're the best to cover that job. So I hope when this is posted, it's been finalized now, it will be posted to the website. I endeavor everyone to read it, take a look at it, provide feedback if there's anything that we may have missed, because this is really our opportunity to dark anymore. We have a platform. We need to take advantage of it. We need to let these people know that, yes, we're in it with them, and here's how we help. This is what we do. So this is the end of my mandate too with the board. So I thank everyone, and it's been great. And the person who takes over this position after me, best of luck and continue on with the journey. So thank you.
Thank you, Spencer. So for the external affair, I was the one who carried more the element in this. So first news is that the NAR CHIM renewal was completed through last year. So for the CRBOH, it's a good news. I want also to share with you that the NAR committee chair has been changed and is Kelly Fernandez from the BGC. Also, there is ongoing initiative. So as I said previously in my introduction, so for the Breathe Freely initiative, that is under the management of Jason McInnes. And organizational outreach, in fact, we are on regular discussion with the BCRSP as a monthly base. We did add similar challenge in terms of vaccination policy, social media policy, and we do have a mutual recognition scope of expertise that we are working on, and in reference to the future of the profession committee that Spencer just showed to us. And in the same idea, we are still involved in the Alberta Society of Health and Safety Professional. It was Spencer sitting in this chair, but now it's going to be Alex who's going to take his place. So that's it for the external affair, and I pass the microphone to communication and promotion.
Hello, everybody. My name is Letty, and I'm one of your Ontario directors and also the chair of the Communications and Promotions Committee. In the past year, we have published 3 newsletters, which we have received positive feedback on. We also continue to publish articles under our regular columns in a newsletter, such as the Leadership Series, book reviews, tools of the trade, profiles, which spotlights on the ROH and ROHT from our membership. In November of 2022, Alex Mercer from our committee and the board also gave a presentation to the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, the OHS diploma program candidates, to talk about the ROH and ROHT certifications. We also continue to update and maintain our LinkedIn page. And if you have any articles of interest for LinkedIn, please can reach out to the committee and we can get that posted. The next slide. Just a reminder to our membership that we have certificate frames and stamps for sale via our website. Next one. And also, I would like to recognize our volunteers here for the newsletter committee, including our editor, article contributors, and translators. And this year, we actually added 2 new translators to our newsletter team, which is great. If you would like to volunteer for the team, again, please reach out to the board. Next slide. And finally, I also want to recognize and thank our core promotions and promotions, communications, and awards committee. That's it.
Hi there. I guess it's on to me. I'm suffering a little bit of a head cold, so I hope that everyone can understand me. I'm a little bit muffled. I understand. I am Suzanne Wild. I am one of the Ontario Board directors. I'm also the board liaison for the exam committees. Next slide. So as mentioned before, we did do a few, we have a few highlights from this year. We did update the ROHT eligibility and the ROHT exam handbook. And as previously mentioned, we did offer the multiple choice component of the exam online using the UTestMe platform. This round, the March sitting was in English only. However, it is going to be now available in French as well for the fall sitting. There is still some work to do. We are considering the applicability of having the essay portion online as well. There's a little bit of logistics questions, and we have to discuss a few things with our vendor, UTestMe. But all that fine work is being done behind the scenes. Next slide. So this is the highlights from the ROH exam committee. As you see, in 2022, we had our written examination in 5 different locations. And in the March sitting, there was 4 different locations as well. And thank you to the committee members on the ROH exam committee. And here is our chief oral examiners and those that graciously volunteered to be part of our oral exam panels as well in Toronto, Ontario, Montreal, Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver. As you can see, these exams take a lot of volunteers, and we thank you. Next slide. And then the ROHT exam committee reports. The exam locations were in 4 different locations this year, and special thanks to our proctors as well. So as I mentioned before, I mean, even the development of, like, this is our opportunity to say thank you to all of our volunteers. The exam process is very important to our membership, and it takes a lot of volunteers and a lot of commitment. And a special thanks to the registrar, the secretariat, Dave and Paul, who helped us do that multiple choice online for the first time this year. It was a lot of work. And I think Helen mentioned earlier, it was a lot of stress, you know, as being the first time around. But I think ultimately it was a success. And yeah, again, thank you to all of our volunteers. We couldn't do it without you, that's for sure.
Hello, everyone, again. I am obviously not Roberto. I am actually going to be filling in for Roberto as he had some commitments he couldn't get away from. So I'm here to talk about the registration, maintenance, and points report. So if you put in your maintenance points, and I really hope that you have, you'll have noticed that we've moved online. So this is the first year for using the new online system for submitting the registration maintenance worksheets. There were a few hiccups there, but for the most part, things are working pretty well now. We've worked through a lot of them and things are running pretty smooth now. I do suggest that you keep in mind that the worksheets are going to be online only. We will not be accepting paper forms. So again, go online, enter your information. It's best to enter the information as you accumulate the points. So for example, if you go to a committee or say go to an annual general meeting of some sort, say this one, you can go online afterwards and enter the information. So you can put that in and it will register and it will stay in there, and it's a great tool for that. To help you with this, as Lucy mentioned earlier in the presentation, there is a maintenance guide for both ROH and ROHT to accompany your submission so that you can actually learn how to do it, or if you need guidance. So that information is on there. These were revised and updated to reflect the new system. So next slide, please. Thank you. So as you may recall, we've had a little pandemic going on the last few years, but we are seeing the bright side now. We are seeing the other end of it. So with that said, this year we'll be looking for full points. If your cycle ended in 2022, 2023, or 2024, you still have that reduction in there. So if you have a cycle that's in there, you get the 15% reduction. ROH will only require 42.5 maintenance points. ROHT will only require 34. If you have a cycle that ends in 2025 or later, it'll be back to the full maintenance points requirements of 50 for ROH and 40 for ROHT. So if you have any questions on it, by all means, look at the registration maintenance booklet or check back on the website. We have information there. So I also want to thank our committee members, our volunteers that worked diligently at getting this information put together. You can see the names on here. We get the forms, we review them, we compile the data, get everything ready so that you can get your maintenance points and continue. So thank you everyone who volunteers for this. So for the next part, we are moving over to awards. So we will move over, I believe, Letty. There we go. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Matthew. Hello again. All right. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So every year, the CRBOH will award one $500 scholarship along with free examination fees to a successful applicant from a college or university program relating to occupational hygiene, chemistry, environmental science, or health and safety. The applicants are evaluated by the awards committee, and this year's chosen winner is Chizikara Nukiwapera. She is a first-year MSc student in the Occupational and Environmental Hygiene program at the University of British Columbia. Her graduate thesis is focused on exposure to ergonomic and musculoskeletal risk factors and the risk of mental health outcomes in young construction workers. Congratulations, Chizikara. Okay. And 2 years ago, the CRBOH introduced a new award, the Andreas S. Korczak Lifetime Achievement Award, in honor of Andrea's extensive and excellent contributions to the profession of occupational hygiene at a provincial, national, and international level. The award is based on a nominations process and is presented to an individual in recognition of extraordinary lifetime achievement in the field of occupational hygiene. And this year, we are pleased to announce that the award goes to William Sparks. I will now call upon Tiffany Clayton from the Occupational Health Division at Imperial Oil to introduce Bill.
Hi there. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm using a cell phone. So I am honored to introduce to you this year's winner, Bill Sparks. On behalf of the entire ROH community, I'd like to congratulate you on this most deserved award. Bill has been a valuable member of our occupational health team within Imperial Oil since 2008. And so when our team saw the notice for nominations, we couldn't help but think we should put Bill's name forward. He has strengthened our team by imparting his vast knowledge through coaching and mentoring of both our new industrial hygienists and our seasoned professionals. Bill's calm demeanor and great sense of humor, combined with his trustworthy approach, enable him to relate just as well to the shop room worker as well as it does to senior management. He can be counted on to provide a balanced, risk-based solution that is founded in strong scientific principles, from petrochemical hazards to physical hazards like norm, all the way to biological concerns like Legionella and COVID. Bill always makes time for his colleagues, and he's happy to work through complex problems with you. His outside-the-box thinking has a unique way of challenging you to test your own bias in a way that builds you up and strengthens your development. He is probably one of the most humble professionals I know, and while this award might shine a light on someone who would never actually seek it, I believe that is all the more reason for us to celebrate his accomplishments today.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for that great introduction. And now, Bill, I'd like to call upon you to say a few words.
Yes, I'm not sure what my bandwidth is like. If I get cut off, let me know. I'd like to thank the CRBOH for giving me this award, Andrea Sass-Korczyk Lifetime Achievement Award. And I look back over my lifetime, and it all started quite a long time ago with back in the 1970s when I was just getting out of high school, and I read this glossy pamphlet about industrial hygiene, and there was this new course at Lambton College. It was a 3-year co-op course. So my guidance counselor said, "Well, why don't you take this? If you don't like it, you can change. You can get something else." So I took the course, and it had some great learnings with co-ops at General Motors and 3M, and I thought there was a lot of potential in this because there was a new Health and Safety Act in Ontario in the 1980s, and there was all these designated substances popping up. Lots of opportunity, hopefully get a great job. So after graduation, I didn't immediately get a job. I sort of took up golf for the summer, but I landed my first job working with the Alberta government in the Occupational Health and Safety Division back in 1982. I was a junior IH and training to be a health and safety inspector. A lot of good opportunities, things like carrying horizontal elutriators, and probably most of you don't know what that is, down into coal mines and doing dust sampling, taking noise measurements at meat packing plants, if you can imagine, as well as even working at West Edmonton Mall when they were trying to build the pirate lake that they have there. They were spraying isocyanates all over the place. But this is a great job because I was truly mentored, and there was great leadership that I had at this job. The only drawback was that I was a government inspector, and you're trying to help people, but they really don't want your help, and they really might not like you. So I learned that part of the art and science of industrial hygiene also had some politics in it at that time. So back in the 80s, I ended up in the late 80s back in Ontario, and again, it was all kinds of stuff was happening. There was WMIS just been put in place, and there was a new approach with the recently elected NDP government to try and put in place a bipartite, tripartite process for occupational health regulations, exposure assessments, changing exposure limits and putting controls in place. It was a long process, but and it wasn't really successful because um, negotiations failed because the parties couldn't agree. And the endpoint ended up being really overbearing and too prescriptive for the workplace. But it taught me a lot. It taught me uh, about the collaborative nature of working towards a common goal. And it also allowed me to understand other people's values and benefits and beliefs. Sorry. So about 15 years ago, I did make a big career change. I did go to Imperial Oil. Um, and it was a hotbed of industrial hygiene, occupational hygiene, and I thought this was going to be my sunset job, an industrial hygienist at a refinery. Great, I can do this till I retire. But since I took that job, I've had 4 different careers. It's sort of morphed and it's grown. And most recently, I've taken on the occupational health function. So I'm working with our clinical colleagues to try and get a fully integrated approach to occupational health in the workplace. Uh, so what have I learned in 40 years? And I'll make this brief. Um, I believe it's important to be proactive about getting feedback. And so if you're an employee, you need to get that feedback. Don't wait until the end of the year feedback session with your boss. Do it now. By seeking feedback from your leaders and your peers, you can make changes more quickly and you'll have a greater impact. Also, when you get to that yearly performance review, you can leverage the changes that you've already implemented and you can show growth. The second thing is you're going to have a lot of changes in your career, so you need to adapt and learn the new skills for each level of your career. As your career progresses, so should your skill set. Continuously update your skills and acquire new ones. You not only increase your value as an employee, but you also ensure that you remain fulfilled as your job changes. Lastly, for those that are leaders, you need to act as coaches and inspire and motivate those people that work with you. Provide them guidance, mentoring, and support. It can be instrumental to their future. Supervisors should always ask questions, solidify understanding, confirm buy-in, motivate their people by using why, and give feedback to help them improve. So thanks for this award and thank you to the CRBOH, my leaders, my mentors, my associates, my friends. And also I'd like to thank my dear wife, Lee. Without without her support, I couldn't have been this successful. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure to hear all this. So we're more than pleased to have you, Bill, with us in our community. So it's now time for me to introduce our oncoming president, which is going to be Matthew Brewer. So just quickly let you know that Matthew is on the board since 2019 and is representing Eastern Canada as ROHE director. So I'm quite sure that Matthew, you will do a really great job, and I'm going to be not too far for next year as a past president. But don't be worried, I won't act as a grandmother over you. So I'm going to let you introduce the new other board members.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And you can grandmother me anytime with this. Um, thank you, everyone, very much for this opportunity. I also want to thank our new directors that we have coming on board. We have Kevin Schmidt, who is going to be our new ROH director for Ontario. And we also have Joey Bellino, who will be our ROH director for Central and Western provinces. And finally, we also have Brad Sherman, ROHT Canada West. Welcome to each and every one of you. We welcome you to the board and look forward to your wonderful input that you're going to provide, your new insight. Unfortunately, because we are gaining, we have to lose a few. And so at this time, unfortunately, we are losing Letty, Spencer, and Sarah. And I just want to personally say thank you very much for all the work that you three have done for the board and how you have helped promote and drive our designations forward in our committee. And we welcome you to participate in any of our committees. And we thank you very much for all your participation that you've done. And so just thank you very much. So now we are going to move over to our Q&A. So we are going to ask you to use the chat function if you have any questions. The floor is now open for member questions, comments. Our moderator, Sarah, will read some questions out and respond to some using chat. If we don't get to all of them, we will in the coming days. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here for this part. But again, if you have questions, by all means, drop them into the chat now.
So far, we've answered all of the questions that have come forward, but if there's more, feel free to send them over.
Absolutely. So if there are any other questions, by all means, drop them into the chat or contact us, let us know. And so at this point, what I'm going to do is I am going to ask, can I get a motion to adjourn this part of the meeting? Remember that this meeting is not over. The AGM aspect is, however, we will be having a presentation afterwards, which I really encourage that you stick around for. So Lucy has put the motion forward. So we will thank you. And now we will take a 5-minute break and it'll be followed by our presentation. We're going to have a presentation up from the ACGIH about the process and organizational updates. Our guest speaker is Philip Rocher. So thank you very much, and I will see you all in 5 minutes. Okay, so hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to stretch their legs and top up their water, coffee, tea, whatever your beverage of choice. And we are going to be starting up again. So I would like to now introduce our speaker. Philip Brochet is going to present here. He is the interim executive director for the ACGIH. He works volunteers and staff to coordinate the work of the ACGIH board, committees, high quality digital and in-personal education, and industry leading electronic and print publications to those practicing occupational hygiene. He earned his MPH in environmental and occupational health from the University of Toledo. He's a member of the ACGIH and AIHA and is also the recipient of the 2019 ACGIH Bluefield Award. He's a certified industrial hygienist and a certified safety professional. And now I am going to hand it over to Philip. So we're just switching the presentation over. There we go. You should have control now.
We cannot hear you, Philip.
Yes, I was about to say that.
You might just have to check your microphone settings. Sometimes this application doesn't like the selected one.
Let's try that. How's that one sound?
Perfect.
There we
Yeah.
go.
555.
We use GoTo for all of our webinars. So I've got like an array of different microphones to pick from, and I got to make sure I'm on the right one. Yeah, so thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, everybody. It's an honor to present to you guys. As Matt said, I'm Phil Rauscher. I've been the interim executive director for 6 months now. Stepped into the role when our last executive director went on to different pastures, right? Been here for 3 years before that, though. And in my previous role, I was actually the director of science education, and then publications got rolled underneath there. Prior to that, I actually worked in industrial hygiene out in the field as a consultant. So I've kind of grown with the organization over the past couple of years, and a big part of it has been feedback from all of our stakeholders, right? So, we're always looking to better represent our members, better represent our stakeholders, and really help the field as much as we can. And it's my driving factor every day, right? So, I really look forward to especially the Q&A part of this. The first part is just, over the last 3 years, there's really been a flurry of changes that have taken place. So it's just to catch everybody up a little bit on what's going on, what to expect from us here pretty soon. But then the part where I get to learn and hopefully, help everybody here is that Q&A. So stay caffeinated, stay lively, stay with me. That's kind of my message, right? So for anybody who's unaware, this is our 85th birthday. And we've done a full court push for the Growing for You campaign. And so you've probably seen those in your inbox if you're on our mailing list. It's a really cool campaign just because it talks right now. I'm really interested in it, but it's the history of the organization up to this point, and then we will see a transition into, hey, this is where we're currently at, this is where we're going, and then the last part is again kind of like that Q&A part where we have a couple planned surveys to get stakeholder feedback, and that hopefully really propels us through the second half of summer, right? For anybody who's unaware, we are a 501c3, so we have a board of directors, and those people are totally volunteers. So I know that there's some people on this call, especially, that can sympathize with when you're called to action and you are called to be on the board of directors for a nonprofit like this. It's a lot of work. It really is. It's a passion project for our volunteers. So I always like to give a shout out, especially to our chair and our treasurer. Dr. Jack Caravanos is now on his second 3-year term in the board of directors for ACGIH. And this is his first year as board chair. So he's a professor down at NYU, but prior to being the chair, he was also the treasurer for 2 years. So he's really a glutton for punishment and really just likes hanging out with the staff, I think. This year, Dr. Lilia Chen, she works down at NIOSH, is our treasurer, and she is in her second year of her first term. So I really hope we get to see both of them stick it out for the next couple of years, and Lilia runs for a second term. It's been great. They continue to carry the torch and do us proud, representing us out in the field, and really just as beacons for their work. So the first thing I like to do is really start off with just an overview of our process, because even people that I've found are seasoned industrial hygienists might not really understand everything that goes into setting a TLV, and really just why it takes a second for us to be responsive to new research and what's happening out there in the field, right? So there's a couple terms here that I like to run through first, and then the next one is a flow chart because, well, if we're all industrial hygienists, we love charts, right? So first and foremost, the terms that I ask everybody to be familiar with is the understudy list. And if you've ever flipped to your TLV book, looked right there in the front of the TLV chemical substances section, there's a whole list of chemicals there, right? And that's kind of our warning to the world. We're saying, hey, this is what's under consideration. This is what we're looking at presently. We, at this point, solicit feedback. We want to know, is there research that's really important to this? Is there something that a trade organization would like us to be aware of going into this? Is there new research that's about to come out? Really, any and all feedback in the understudy phase is welcome. We want to make sure we get it right the first time, if at all possible. While something's on the understudy list, there's a draft documentation that's in the works, right? So our committees are made up of other volunteers. Chemical substances is up to 30 professionals, and there's a wide range there. We have veterinarians, medical doctors, toxicologists, industrial hygienists, epidemiologists, just a whole myriad of individuals that help us with that, right? So they work on this. They come up with a draft documentation that gets presented to the whole committee. After this draft documentation is accepted by the whole committee, be it BEI, be it chemical substances, be it physical agents, it then moves on to the board. The board of directors is really there as the seal of approval, the quality seal of approval. They look at it and they say, did it move through the process? Is there anything that we can see that might be a hang up? That is something that is there leftover correspondence from the field? Is there something that wasn't addressed? And once they look at it and say the process was followed to a T, at that point they vote yay or nay on it. If they vote yes on it, that new documentation and that new TLV move on to the notice of intended changes list. And really, this is the first time where the world gets to see what the new documentation looks like, what we plan on doing with it. And then again, we ask for more feedback there, right? And once we gather all of that feedback, it actually moves through the process again, but we'll see that one a little bit. Public comments revision is that stage where we are asking for that feedback. So during understudy and during the NIC is really when we solicit all of that stuff. Then the final stage is the adopted documentation / value, right? So this is where we actually see the work taking place, right? So you'll see on there the understudy list. That's sitting there. That's our warning to the world. We're soliciting external output there. Someone's writing a draft documentation simultaneously with it being on the understudy list, right? So the second something goes on that list, that's really when we hope to get that feedback so it can go into that documentation, and we can keep it moving along in the process. As I said, once something's written, it goes to the full committee for review. They go back and forth. Really, the secret is if you were in the room with the chemical substances committee, there's almost 1,000 years worth of expertise that goes into that, right? It's nuts the number of consultants that are in the fold, that do all of this stuff. But every single volunteer in there has been published for probably over 10 years, right? That's a younger member. Some of the people have been in there for 50 years themselves, right? So they're really comfortable with it. They fully understand the ACGIH process, ACGIH ways, and it's cool. It's a debate of all of these brilliant minds that come together to make sure that the documentation in the TLV is sound, right? So once they're all on board with it, they vote yes, and it moves forward through the process. As I said, it goes to the board to make sure that there's that quality seal on it. Board approves, it comes out on the NIC. And that at that point is when the public, you guys will be able to actually see a documentation and see the rationale behind the new TLV. This is the part where we get inundated with stuff, right? And I absolutely love it because we get all of that feedback. That Q&A stuff comes along with it. We get new studies that people have found. We get things that we haven't looked at before. So it's a really good critical review. All of that information goes back out to the committee. They review that information. They decide, okay, do we agree with that? Does that change our point of departure, or are we still pretty confident in what we were looking at? If they have to make revisions, they make them. The full committee approves it. It goes to the board, and you'll see there's a little slanted line there that goes back up to the NIC, because if there's any changes, sorry, bumped my space. If there's any changes, it stays right there on the NIC until the committee is confident that all of the feedback has been gotten from anybody, right? And they've addressed all of the comments that come to us. So sometimes you'll see something hang out on the notice of intended change list for a while because it's essentially in an eddy there, right? They make changes, they send it out for comment, they get new comments back, they look at it again, and if there's any changes, it goes back onto the NIC. That way, we make sure that everything has been included in that. We can say that all of the opinions have been reviewed, right? If we don't get any feedback while it's on the NIC, or if the committees look at it and decide that it doesn't materially change what's in the documentation and the TLV number, that's when it goes back to the board. The board will approve it again, and it finally becomes an adopted TLV, right? So this is a pretty long process with a lot of steps, and I don't. Sometimes people just don't appreciate how many steps could go into an adopted TLV, but it's awesome because that keeps us, on that leading edge. The cool thing that we did this year is, in the past, something would be on the understudy list. The committee meets several times throughout the year, but the board only ratified things at the end of the year in November or December. So essentially, something could be written in February of one year, and then it's actually ratified by the board to go on to the notice of intended changes that December, and then it waited a whole nother year to become a TLV. And something weird happened during COVID. Everybody started disinfecting with ultraviolet, right? And specifically that 222 wavelength. And it kind of made us take a look at it and say, okay, when we need to be responsive to the field, it can't take us 2 years to finally come up with an adopted TLV for something if it was written earlier in the year, right? That's just too much of a bottleneck, too much of a choke point. So we need to find a way to get this out there and be more responsive to our stakeholders. So this year is this new process, right? It doesn't really limit how much comments we've gotten. We're still getting really good feedback. Comment period is still 3 months long, But really what we did is we're having the board meet twice a year, specifically for the purpose of ratifying TLVs, right? And that lets us have a 6-month lead time for these things. As you can see here, if something's written in February of one year, it can go out for ratification in May. Everyone can see it in the middle of summer, and then the comment period opens up in July, right? So it could be a finished TLV as early as December, in theory, if we don't get that feedback in that second comment period. But the big deal is now there's a second comment period, right? I keep shouting that from the rooftops, trying to get everybody to talk about it, push that knowledge out there. We did a whole campaign where we specifically tried to reach out to industry groups, into labor groups to make sure that they were aware of this too, because we didn't want anybody to feel like they were cut out. So we like to keep flashing that in front of everybody to say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. We want to make sure that we're getting you information and we're getting it to you in a timely manner, right? So switching gears a little bit from the TLV process, something that I like to just point out is some of the education that we offer throughout the year. It's a big part of our portfolio and it's always growing, right? So if anybody's ever had the pleasure of sitting through the fundamentals of industrial ventilation course, I say that and it's not tongue in cheek. It is an amazing course. It's 4.5 days of just industrial ventilation, and it's awesome. The instructors are amazing at what they can do over those 4.5 days, right? It's very hands-on. It's right there. You have a ventilation system that's set up in the room with you. So it lets you learn things through trial and error, right? You got a pitot tube, you're putting it in there, you're building a whole fan curve. And really all they ask is that you understand algebra and just enough fluid dynamics to say, I've drank milk through a straw, right? So it's amazing the transformation that can take place from Monday morning just knowing algebra and drinking milk through a straw to Friday midday, people walking out of there with these amazing questions that really show that they understand the concepts to the point where they can go out and use the ventilation manual in the field, right? New one that's going to be up next year. We did it last year. We're doing 1 year in between them, is advanced industrial ventilation. And it's a little bit more of a symposium, right? Topics don't necessarily build on each other, but it's for people that have been out in the field, have done those basic pitot tubes and are going to the next level, right? What happens when, you're in a hot climate and your ventilation goes outside, the fan's outside, and you eventually want to exhaust outside. Clearly in the winter, you might be hitting a different dew point. You might be changing the dynamics of that air. So that's one of the topics they cover. They like to cover hoods. And then really computational fluid dynamics is a big one too, right? That's just a theme that you'll see throughout the ventilation committee period. And a big part of what we want our ventilation education moving forward to include. As we worry more about electricity and energy costs, being able to model these things, look at efficiency before you build it is becoming more and more important. So you do that through that computational fluid dynamic software, and it's really not that hard to use, right? The basics of it are something that even I can grasp. So it's an amazing thing. If you haven't gotten our emails, Learning Pass continues. It kind of started in COVID, and we're moving forward with it as just a mainstay. So there's a webinar every other week on various topics that cover everything, right? From noise, heat, ultrafine particulates, you name it, it's on there. A little bit of ventilation too. So we have that. It's an offering as the whole. I think it's the cheapest way you can buy education anywhere. But then also we're splitting that up into more specific tasks. If you kind of want to try it out, we do have a complimentary webinar coming up that was sponsored by Slate Safety. It's on heat stress, and they just paid to make it available to everybody, right? So it's a good way to get in there, try it out, see just what it looks like, the functionality of it. Um, and then in addition to that, we have professional development courses that are 100% online as well. There's a little bit of a gap that's out there that we're hoping to fill because it seems like it's getting harder and harder. I got 3 kids, all of them under 5, to go away to a conference for a week and come back to 3 weeks worth of emails uh, and a whole house that was running without a parent for a whole week just adds a lot, right? It's awesome to see everybody. It's awesome to have that face-to-face interaction, but it's a lot. Having these short courses there kind of builds on some knowledge, lets you go a little bit deeper into some topics without all of that, right? Because I get it, it's harder to scoot away for a whole week. So there's a short course on computational fluid dynamics, an intro to noise, the basics of industrial ventilation, which is almost all of the didactic part of the fundamentals without the hands-on lab. So that cuts a significant part of that class out, but it's a good refresher for people that are already aware of a lot of the ventilation concepts and just haven't had to do it in a long time, right? Additionally, we got some on biomonitoring, and it's always growing. We got 3 of them in the hopper right now that we're working on releasing, and really the hope is, to bring people along the continuum, right? There's more and more people that seem to be, as you guys already talked about, in the safety field and not necessarily, self-identifying as an industrial hygienist, but that's okay. That's a good group to recruit from, right? So we're kind of growing in the same way in that regard. We're hoping that if we offer them the education, it's not a huge leap for them to go, this isn't that bad. I can do industrial hygiene. So we keep on it with that. Some publications that you know and love from us. The TLV book has been out. We've done the best we can to make sure that comes out before the end of every year. And the hope is that if you can see the TLVs before the end of the year, that helps with beginning of year reviews, right? So if you remember back to that breakdown where there's those new comment periods, that's a quick turnaround for staff to get it out there, but we think it's worth the value add, right? Occupational exposure values. If you've ever picked up a copy of that, it's the TLV side by side with the German Max and the PELs and the RELs, just to kind of give a little bit of a range there, right? It's out now. We're taking pre-orders for the print. The printer says we will have actual paper ventilation manuals in next week, right? I've got my advanced copy that was the proof. They are a real book. If you want it digitally, it's available that way. But the newest edition of the ventilation manual is coming now, right? So, and one of the cool things you'll see in that one, I'm going to show it a little bit later on, but there's been a lot of CFD added to that, right? I think we all learned the basics of ventilation with the little stick drawings that shows, oh, this is the capture velocity this far outside of a hood, right? And look, we added flanges, and look how much farther it goes. We're kind of taking that to the next level. We want to show, all right, this is the continuum. It's not a hard cutoff. This is why we have a lot of these values built in, and it's differential, right? Some things that are on pre-sale right now that we're going to have out by the end of the year. Don't forget the worker is, if you've ever read Blind Hog's Acorn, it's an older book, but it's a bit of it's stories from the field, right? If you've ever been to one of those HHE presentations at a conference where, it's just industrial hygienists talking about weird situations they've been in, this is that, only in a book. So a little bit of a lighter read for some of us that have been out there in the field for a long time, but we're hoping it also provides, again, some of that education to somebody who's newer coming up into the field, right? Used in class for just some strange things that are good points of discussion. The Atlas of Fungal Spores is, if I had to describe it, it's going to be a coffee table book of fungal spores, which in this group might be something that's really exciting to hear about, right? It's not a coffee table book of coffee tables, but it'll do for our purposes. But it's gorgeous, right? I've seen the layout of it. It's finishing up in layout right now, and it's about to go to print, so you can have that one in hand by the end of the year as well. But it's amazing. A few mycologists collected all of their photos from over the years, and said, hey, we want to get this out so that people coming up in the field with mold and bacteria being more and more of an issue out there, and more mycologists being pulled into the industrial hygiene realm, we want to get something that makes it an easier transition for them, right? And helps the industrial hygienist understand what they're looking for, looking at. So that one's coming up. And then also, we've revamped the bioaerosols committee. It is in existence again. If you flip to the back of a TLV book that's 4 or 5 years old, you'll notice that it stayed static for a very long time. So they're back up, they're running, and the first thing they're looking at is the bioaerosols book, right? To make sure it's up to date and getting everybody the best information. So stay tuned for that one. It is written, it's moving through the editorial process now, so we're hoping to get that one out to everybody as soon as possible as well. And then, without further ado, this is, I think, why everybody's here, right? I throw this one out there just in case. This is what you get for sticking with me. If somebody hasn't picked up their TLV book for the year or hasn't seen, what all's in the hopper, I like to throw this one out there and just highlight a couple things for everybody, right? This one, big deal, I'm going to say, for adopted. Glyphosate moved totally through the process, and now there's a glyphosate TLV, right? I was in a presentation just earlier this year on the epidemiology of glyphosate, and the presenter was unaware that there was a TLV, right? So with everything going on out there in the world, the prevalence of that in agriculture, I like to highlight that that's out there, right? And it's a little bit higher than what you would expect too, as well, right? It's sitting at 5 milligrams per meter. So read that one. It's really interesting how some of those meta-analysis break down, but you can follow that up in the documentation, right? On the NIC, so these actually just closed out a couple months ago, but these are the current ones that have gone out there. Some cool things that you'll see. Benzene has been one. We've got a lot of feedback on that, as you can imagine, with the prevalence of that out there in the world. But it's getting increasingly lower. As we find this stuff and the endpoints of it, we're just realizing, hey, this is where this is creeping down too, right? So there's going to be some challenges with that one, right? As an industrial hygienist, I know the TLV committee works to really just review toxicology, epidemiology, and say, hey, this is where that would have to be to avoid these endpoints, right? And then it's left to the field to say, okay, well, then what's our best sampling strategy, and where are we going to go for controls for this stuff, right? So the event committee is well aware of it. They're out there, they're working in the field because a lot of them are consultants to see, okay, what's this going to affect? How can we control some of that stuff? And what are we looking at, right? So that one's on there. Another one I like to point out that's on there is endotoxin, right? If you go to that same TLV book that's 4 or 5 years old and you flip back there, you'd see endotoxin was sitting underneath the bioaerosols committee for a very long time, right? It's kind of out there, but with them being inactive, it didn't get a lot of traction. So now it's out there. There's an NIC that is proposed. So we've gotten some feedback on that one. We're looking for other people to keep submitting. I anticipate it's probably one of those ones that'll stay on the NIC, but I don't know for sure right now since the comment period's not over, right? Yeah, so make sure, go out there, read those things. They're changing in the workplace. There won't be a TLV book release that has those listed. So, this is why we tell people, make sure you're checking your email, make sure you're checking the website for all of these updates, right? On the BEI side, we had a few that were adopted. Styrene was one. It comes more in line with the TLV. There's a couple that went on to the NIC. Platinum's one, arsenic, xylene. You'll see all of those ones. But there were 2 negative feasibility studies that came out. And I like to highlight those because, that's not an end-all be-all, right? It's a documentation. It's freely available. If you have questions about it, you email us and we'll send it to you. But that negative feasibility assessment is really the committee saying, listen, we looked at this, but for some reason a BEI just wasn't made. And a lot of times it's, testing issues. So the TLV committee doesn't necessarily worry about the lab, but BEI, knowing that this is the limit and this is your testing ability, right? This is the metabolite you're testing for in urine or whatever. They pretty much have to have a lab that can find something. So if there's a problem with the laboratories, or if there's a problem with it blending in with other metabolites, they say that, and we hope that we can find a solution for it. So every time you see a negative feasibility assessment, I really encourage you to read it, pass it along to somebody that has that feedback or could potentially have feedback, and get that to us, because that might help us solve the problem. It would be cool to be able to come up with a BI after getting some of those correspondence, right? Physical agents has stayed busy as well. There were 2 new adopted ones. Heat stress, if everybody seems to be following that these days, thanks to climate change. But if you read it compared with the old one, really what we were hoping to do is clarify that a little bit more, right? I know there was a lot of confusion out in the field about how to use that, because there was almost too many options, right? And it seemed to almost read that you had to go through all of the options to be successful, which is not true. Really, that TLV is unique because it's set up like a menu, right? If you don't have the technical capability in-house to be able to take some of the physiological measurements, or to look at work rates or something like that to calculate times, you have that work rest cycle at the beginning, and that's kind of just scratching the surface. It's a really good qualitative assessment almost to say, hey, if it's under this and you're resting this much, don't worry about it. But once you get into that, where, I worked in Arkansas in paper, right? You woke up and you didn't have the ability to work, right? It was just, the air was so thick you couldn't ride a motorcycle, and it was too hot and humid to do anything. So that's where you start to go down that rabbit hole and say, all right, let's look at our work. Can we do physiological monitoring? What else are we going to do? And it's a menu. If you want to skip right to physiological monitoring, cool, have at it, right? Another really cool one that's on the NIC right now, above shoulder work. It's totally new. Research is just field. So it's hopefully something that we're going to see grow, right? Some more studies on those muscle groups that we're trying to protect would be awesome to be able to add to that. In the new vent manual, like I said, there's some things that might, and I hope I don't cause anybody to just have like that glass shattering sound inside of their head when I say this. You'll see that the last chapter is still all of the VS plates, but that chapter is no longer chapter 13. Honestly, we were looking at it, and there was just new information that had to be put into it, something that is growing concern, and we have to talk about. Energy efficiency being one. It has its whole own chapter now, because we can talk about some of that stuff. And then another one that was added was special topics techniques. We pulled some of those things out, but with nanomaterials becoming more and more of an issue, combustible dust, NFPA doing what they've done over the past couple of years, designing for these things is, you just have to do it now. We weren't that concerned with it 50 years ago, and now we realize, the error of our ways, right? Or science is trying to surpass us. So you'll also see that there's a section in that kind of came out of all of the COVID white papers, right? But what do you do with your ventilation in-house whenever all of the people are your problem, right? Or you have those moving targets. So there's a section on how to make sure that for the next pandemic, you're ready, right? You'll also see this one isn't in color, sadly, but you'll see how we started to incorporate some of that CFD, right? Where it shows the blending, shows exactly what's happening inside of the tubes to show, hey, this is why we take this, the measurement here, so many duct lengths down from the point where there's the merger, because this is what airflow looks like, and this is where it finally turns something close to laminar, right? So hoping that illustrates the point a little bit better for everybody. As I said, kind of teased, there's other new pubs that are coming out. The cool thing with Don't Forget the Worker is we actually partnered with a photographer that has some pictures from his time in the field, years and years of industrial photography. So it's a lighter read, helps to highlight some of the points that are in the book, but also has a little bit of that, if you picked it up at conference and took it on the airplane, it would be a good read for the way home, right? This is that middle one is an actual page from the Atlas of Fungal Spores. So you can see it gives you some background information in addition to the picture, but it's a really quick hitter, right? It's split up in ways that helps you identify what you're looking at underneath the microscope a little bit faster, tells you where it lives, gives you some of the references, and then if there's any synonyms for it, right? It's almost a dictionary of fungal spores. One that's out right now that you can go to the website and get delivered to you right away is the Guide for Testing Ventilation Systems. And really, it's kind of a teased out version of what's in the back of the design manual. But the hope was with less and less industrial hygienists being at a facility, it's more and more important for the maintenance department to know how to do some of these measurements, right? If there's one IH sitting at corporate headquarters 200 miles away, somebody on site has to know what they're looking at whenever they do this, right? And if there's a good preventative maintenance program in place, that data has to be reliable for that IH that's back there at HQ, right? So that was a lot of acronyms. So we made this specifically for that purpose, right? We wanted to keep the cost down. We wanted to keep it short so that it can go to the maintenance tech that's on site. They can look at it and leave with a pretty good idea of just what they can do, right? Something else I'm really proud of over the past year has been our partnerships. We were always looking, and that's why one of the reasons I'm so happy to be here, right? We're always looking to work with people on projects, always looking for ways that we can help. It's really the core of our mission is to help people. So we continue to grow our partnerships with AIHA, BCSP this year. We're working with them. They're actually offering some fundamentals of industrial ventilation courses at their headquarters so that all of their certificates can come, get a little bit of a prorated amount off of the non-member rate and just help make that transition, right? They have the OHST, they have CSPs, so they want to make sure that they're ready for that transition to be able to jump in and do some of the IH work when an industrial hygienist isn't around, right? Continue to grow with ASHRAE. We continue to grow with IAQA, with IOHA. Anybody that'll hang out with me, I'm on board with working with, right? So again, I'm really happy to be here because of that. One thing that I like to show that I can pull up right here before we go is a new member benefit that a lot of people just aren't aware of, right? So if you go to, if you're a member and you're on our website, this is something that we released just last year, but we had this issue before, right? There was always a limit on the number of documentations someone could download. And it just kind of stuck in my craw that if we want to have really high functioning industrial hygienists out there in the field, we shouldn't be building barriers to them getting the documentation, right? So to make that easier, we took all of the documentation, we moved them online to just a website, and we put it in our member area, right? So if you go to acgih.org/data hub, as you can see right up there, all of the documentations are online now, including all of the NIC documentation, right? So if you go in there, you can see, everything. It helps if I'm logged in though. You can see everything that went into the making of that documentation. You get the recommendations. It's everything that you used to have to go back and pull off of a shelf, right? And the idea is that if we can get it on your phone, that's going to help you while you're out there. Something that's I can kind of let the cat out of the bag right now too. We started partnering with TechStreet 2-3 years ago to sell our publications digitally. We're taking the next step with that just next week, and we're going to offer a library subscription at a greatly reduced rate, right? Compared to buying all of our books. But in-house, we've moved our books digitally online as well, and you'll be able to click through a book using issue software, which is, if you've ever done like professional safety online, it's the software that they use. So for a low rate for members, you get all of our books right there on a phone that you can be able to flip through it, right? Because we just want to remove all the barriers. We want to make sure the information gets out there as fast as we can, right? So with that, that is my contact information. The email, the phone number, they all go right to my cell phone that follows me around all of the time. So I do my best to pick it up whenever somebody calls me, because usually if they're calling me, then it is, something that's extremely urgent. So with the exception of tomorrow, this weekend, I'm going on a backpacking trip outside of cell phone range, so you won't be able to find me tomorrow. But if you call me on Tuesday, it will ring back and you'll get a hold of me, right? So I encourage people, if you have any feedback, if there's anything you'd like to see, shoot me an email. I take all of it really serious because, without you guys out there doing, and gals, people, doing the work every day, I don't get to do this job. So I'm always happy to serve. So with that, I've taken up all of my half hour and then some, but it's just a lot of stuff. So yeah, I look forward to the Q&A.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. So are there any questions? If there are any questions from the membership, just by all means, drop it into the chat here, and we will bring them forward.
Oh, okay. I see one. Sarah asked, have we ever dropped an agent from the NIC? And yes, actually, we do it. I'm not going to say regularly, but it's not rare either. It's somewhere in between those two, right? In my time here, I've seen a couple where that happens. And definitely there's been value changes as well because of that feedback. So it's not totally unheard of to have something fall off the NIC completely.
Okay, thanks for that. I just wanted to expand on that question too with the new TLV development process. So now that there's the second comment period this year, so for the ratification and the data hub update, so like specifically, let's say for benzene, there'll be new information available in June. Is that right? On data hub?
So any changes that were made will be available. They're going up next week, right? So that will be available for everybody to look at. With that tighter turnaround, I will say that if there are substantial comments on something, you might not see a totally new documentation, right? Which isn't a big change from in the past. It's been there before where something, if it gets a substantial amount of feedback, the volunteer just doesn't have time to address all of the comments. So it'll just ride with the same documentation over again. So there will be another comment period. We will solicit all of that, but you might not see a change, right?
Okay, thank you.
We also had another question here in the chat. Will the library subscription have an option for corporate subscription with multiple users?
Yes, so that is the goal. That is the goal. We've been trying to make it easier and easier for individuals to bundle, right? So we have our organizational memberships now for bigger companies, and the thought is, and it's been very successful. Our membership has actually gone up over the past couple of years because of it. Somebody who might not have been hardcore industrial hygienist enough to want to join in the past, but has to dabble in it. If we can roll them in with other safety professionals to come into the fold and work with us, organizational memberships do that, right? It knocks down that price per member depending on a sliding scale, right? But we plan to do the same thing with the library subscription. That way it'll be right there it'll have its own dedicated website. You'll have your own login and we can sell it to multiple people.
Okay, thank you for that answer. We have another question here. Fully understanding ACGIH's position and formal statements regarding don't use us as standard settling body, don't adopt without assessing feasibility, etc. Some, or many, jurisdictions still do. Is there an opportunity for ACGIH to make a bigger deal of that position or educate regulatory bodies on that?
Yeah. And you guys are the worst at it too, right? I mean, no, it's, I'm always down to have that conversation, right? We actually, I just talked with OSHA last year about that, and there was a little bit more of a separation there just because of that. It's, I'm always trying to find ways to have that conversation. I know that, and I'm not calling it a shortcut, but since we're out there working on these things and putting it out there and warning industrial hygienists, or advising industrial hygienists with our opinion, I know it's a tempting thing to grab and use, right? But we just talked about benzene. We have excellent ventilation engineers that are out there in the field all of the time, and they're sitting here right now going, okay, well, like, how do we actually do this? And if they're that good and they're amazing, me just being an industrial hygienist knows, well, there's some lag time there before you can really use this thing. This is the goal. This is where we're going. But it terrifies me whenever somebody just picks that up and goes, okay, well, this is the new standard, because I don't know how y'all do it. I have no idea how everybody gets down to that in that quick of a turnaround, right? It's everybody, you must all get project management 101 in like fourth grade, and just be able to run with it, because some of those are substantial changes, especially if you go down to a 0.02 on benzene. That's a fast change to do overnight. So I give all of you credit for that. And also, if you ever have anyone that tells you that we don't have that opinion, please tell them to call me, shoot me an email, whatever. I will re-explain the position to them, right?
Yeah, and someone actually commented and said the federal government here references the ACGIH TLVs as their exposure limits directly. And I believe they do here in Nova Scotia as well, provincial government. Someone also says, can we invite you to our meetings with the regulators? So
if you get me, you get my lawyer right there. That's
I think, do they pay the airfare? So.
And it depends what time of year. I don't want to go too far north if it's December, okay?
Parts of Canada are below, So,
exactly.
Yeah. So
none of it in July. We'll go none of it in July. How about that?
Been there, done that. Are there any other questions? If there are any other questions, by all means, drop them into the chat. And we'll just give it a moment there.
Yeah, for sure.
I understand about the Nunavut. I did Nunavut in July and August, and then flew straight to Virginia in August. So that was a little bit of a culture shift, temperature shift. So
that's a heat stress issue right there. See, now you should have taken 2-3 days and been able to just sit out by the pool and acclimate yourself. And
it was pretty much that.
Nice.
So it doesn't look like there are any other questions. So I'll just say thank you very much for your presentation. It was greatly appreciated. There was a lot of wonderful information that we can take back with us and we can look forward to. And it was great to know about these resources as well and some of the courses. So thank you, everyone. Also, thank you to everyone else who did attend. We appreciate your attendance to this presentation. And with that, I will bid you a good day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone. And we will see you all at the next one.